Josef Mengele in 22 minutes. Before we dive deep into this gripping story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. It helps us bring more fascinating tales from the annals of history directly to you. In the quiet town of Günzburg, southern Germany, Josef Mengele was born in 1911. The Mengele family was an affluent one, with a foundry that produced essential farm equipment. This prosperity granted Josef a life of relative privilege. Growing up in a tumultuous era, Germany was rapidly evolving. Forming as a unified nation in 1871, it soon found itself entangled in alliances that would set the stage for the First World War. As a child, Josef witnessed his father, Karl, join the war efforts, leaving behind a family and a business. Amidst such upheaval, his mother's unwavering spirit not only kept the family intact, but also thrived their business, ultimately becoming a significant producer of threshing machinery in Germany. The family's prominence is still visible today, with streets named in their honor. But as history would soon show, Josef's path would contrast starkly with the family's reputable image. In his teenage years, Josef was a diligent student with a passion for art, music, and sports. After graduating high school, he wavered between pursuing dentistry and medicine. He finally settled on the latter, focusing on anthropology and genetics. In 1930, his academic journey led him to Munich, where he enrolled in medicine and philosophy, hinting at an intellectual drive that would later lead to chilling outcomes. His arrival in Munich coincided with the rise of the Nazi Party. Founded in the wake of World War I, the party gained traction, especially after the economic downturn of 1929. The world would soon see how the fusion of Josef's ambitions and the sinister ideologies of the Nazis would result in some of the darkest chapters of human history. In the throes of the Great Depression of the early 1930s, Hitler and his associates gained popularity with messages of xenophobia and dissatisfaction with Germany's global standing. Josef Mengele, while not immediately joining the Nazi Party, was immersed in the political upheavals of the time. In March 1931, he became a member of the Stahlhelm, an ex-servicemen's organization named after the helmets worn by German soldiers during World War I. As a young man, Mengele found early appeal in the Nazi Party, especially as he witnessed its influence grow among university students. While initially unaligned, Mengele felt compelled to participate in the political arena, driven by a fear of a potential Marxist-Bolshevik takeover in Germany. By 1932, the Nazis became the largest party in Germany, securing 40% of the national vote. However, the inability to form a majority government led to political instability, making the country vulnerable to either the Nazis or the Communists. In a pivotal moment, Germany's political and business elites decided to incorporate Hitler and several of his senior members into the government by late 1932 and early 1933. This miscalculation resulted in the Nazis swiftly establishing a one-party state in the first half of 1933. By 1934, Mengele was deeply involved in his studies. He pursued a doctorate and worked as a medic in the mid-1930s. Around this time, the Stahlhelm, of which Mengele was a member, merged with the Nazi Party's original paramilitary wing, the Sturmabteilung or Brown Shirts, due to Hitler's mistrust of the Stahlhelm's monarchist leanings. A kidney ailment forced Mengele to leave the organization, focusing more on his academic pursuits. Mengele's research culminated in a 1935 PhD for a thesis examining racial differences through the lower jaw. Importantly, this work did not yet show the extreme racist or anti-Semitic views that would later define him. After completing his doctorate, Mengele briefly practiced medicine but soon transitioned to research. He then joined the Third Reich Institute for Heredity, Biology, and Racial Purity at the University of Frankfurt in 1937. Under the mentorship of Ottmar Freiherr von Verschuer, a proponent of race hygiene and Hitler admirer, Mengele's views took a darker turn, setting him on a path that would lead to infamy. Josef Mengele, prior to his involvement in Frankfurt, showed an interest in race and genetics without an overt racial bias. However, upon his immersion into Frankfurt's environment in the late 1930s, he was heavily influenced by Nazi racial ideology. He joined the Nazi Party in May 1937, becoming member 5,574,974. Mengele collaborated closely with von Verschuer during this period, producing reports for Nazi-led courts judging individuals based on the Nuremberg laws, oppressive regulations disenfranchising the Jewish community. They would sometimes conduct physical examinations on defendants, gauging features like nose shape to ascertain Jewish ancestry. Despite earlier unbiased research methodologies in Munich, Mengele's shift in Frankfurt leaned heavily into pseudo-scientific racial theories rooted in Nazi beliefs. This change in character and alignment with Nazi ideals was evident when he became one of von Verschuer's assistant physicians. Mengele's discussions began to revolve around improving races through appropriate selection. Politically, he grew deeply entrenched in the Nazi regime. Shortly after joining the Nazi Party, Mengele applied for membership in the SS Schutzstaffel, the paramilitary wing overseeing concentration camps across Central and Eastern Europe. He later joined the Waffen-SS and institutions such as the Third Reich Institute and the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, both prominent in German eugenics and acting as channels for the Nazi racial agenda. Simultaneously, the 1930s saw the Nazis gearing Europe for conflict. Hitler's ambitions to counteract the Treaty of Versailles became evident. By 1938, Germany had annexed Austria and parts of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France's patience thinned, leading to their declaration of war on Germany when Poland was invaded in September 1939, marking the commencement of the Second World War. Amidst this turmoil, Mengele faced personal challenges. Preparing to marry Irina in 1939, rumors circulated about her potential Jewish lineage. Though friends vouched for her Nordic ways, archival searches did not entirely dismiss the allegations. Consequently, while Josef Mengele could not comprehensively prove that he wasn't marrying a woman with a hint of Jewish ancestry, he managed to sidestep the question without answering it fully. Ironically, the man soon to be making life-and-death decisions based on racial purity couldn't get a certificate from the Nazi regime attesting to his children's pure Aryan lineage. His son, Rolf, later mentioned that Mengele saw the war as a vital effort to uplift the German nation, which had been repressed since the aftermath of World War I. Despite his eagerness, a recurring kidney ailment delayed his enlistment until summer 1940, when the German panzer divisions were already marking victories in Western Europe. Initially, Mengele was placed at a military base in Kassel, central Germany. He didn't stay there long before being moved to a combat role in the Waffen-SS. Elevated to the rank of Untersturmführer, second lieutenant, Mengele spent months in occupied Poland. He worked with the Race and Resettlement Office, which gauged the racial purity of individuals selected to be German settlers in Eastern Europe. The Nazi regime's objective was clear: displace non-Germans from the newly acquired Lebensraum, living space, in Eastern Europe. While Mengele served in Poland, Nazi Germany continued its victorious march. Post the swift conquest of Poland in September 1939, Europe saw a lull in the action as Britain and France braced themselves for a potential assault. The German war machine then moved to occupy Denmark and Norway before swiftly advancing through France. By the close of summer 1940, only Britain stood defiant against Nazi Germany. The situation grew more complex with Italy under Mussolini, joining forces with Hitler. The duo began operations in North Africa, aiming for the strategic Suez Canal. By mid-1941, much of Europe, including the Balkans, had succumbed to the Axis powers. The war scenario looked grim for Winston Churchill's Britain. With the war seemingly going their way, the Nazis became even more ambitious and sinister. Previously, they had thought of exiling Europe's Jewish population to Madagascar. But as the North African campaign faltered, the Nazis conceived a more horrifying plan: the final solution. The Jews would be sent to concentration camps spread across Central and Eastern Europe. A few would be enslaved in factories, while most would meet their end in gas chambers. This horrific policy was approved at the Wannsee Conference in January 1942, leading to mass extermination at camps like Treblinka, Sobibor, and Auschwitz. Josef Mengele was assigned to Auschwitz after some time in military service in 1941. Initially posted in Poland, he was later sent to the Eastern Front. This was during the period when Hitler initiated Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in history, targeting the Soviet Union. Despite the German army's initial success in the invasion, their progression was halted by the ferocity of the Russian winter and the Soviet army's effective counter-strategies. Mengele served specifically in Ukraine during 1941, earning him the Iron Cross Second Class. By January 1942, Mengele became part of the medical corps of the Waffen-SS Viking Division, a unit that penetrated deep into Russian territory. Despite this unit's frontline engagements, Mengele's skills as a medic relegated him to a more defensive role. His bravery was evident in July during a battle near the towns of Rostov and Bataisk. There, he courageously saved 2 soldiers from a burning tank, leading to his receipt of the Iron Cross First Class, the Black Badge for the wounded, and the Medal for the care of the German people. Towards the end of 1942, Mengele returned to Poland. This move was likely influenced by his mentor, Professor Verschuer, who became a director at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin. This institution played a pivotal role in the Nazis' racial purity and eugenics research. With the concentration camp system expanding, the institute saw an opportunity for unchecked research on the camp inmates. Verschuer, planning to visit these camps for research, indicated an intention to bring along some of his former associates and students. As Mengele was on his grim trajectory, the broader war was turning against Germany. Following their defeat at Stalingrad, the German armies faced increasing pressure from the Russians. By spring of 1943, the Western Allies, bolstered by the US's entrance into the war in December 1941, overcame the Italian and German forces in North Africa. Later, they opened a southern front in Europe, commencing with the invasion of Sicily, known as Operation Husky. Concurrently, the Russians pushed the Germans into Ukraine and Poland. By summer of 1944, the Western Allies had also established a front with the D-Day landings in Normandy. The eventual defeat of Nazi Germany was evident, though uncertainties remained regarding the specifics of the retreat and post-war settlements. In May 1943, Mengele, who had risen to the rank of Hauptsturmführer, equivalent to a captain, was posted to Auschwitz. This camp, which began modestly after Poland's conquest, grew exponentially by 1943 under the leadership of Rudolf Höss. The Auschwitz complex comprised 3 main camps: Auschwitz, the original camp housing administrative centers, guards' quarters, and some early detention facilities, Auschwitz the Satters, Sekten, Birkenau. This was largely an extermination camp. Jews, Roma gypsies, Soviet prisoners of war, and other persecuted groups were systematically murdered using the gas Zyklon B. Their bodies were then incinerated in on-site crematoria. Over 1 million individuals, predominantly Jews, met their end here. Auschwitz III, Monowitz. Operating between 1942 and 1945, this camp functioned primarily as a slave labor facility, aiding in the production of synthetic rubber for the IG Farben Chemical Company. Upon arriving at Auschwitz in early summer 1943, Mengele was designated by Edward Wirths, the camp's chief medical officer, as the chief physician of the Romani family camp. Josef Mengele played a brutal and pivotal role at Auschwitz concentration camp during the Holocaust. As a physician, Mengele was deeply involved in the notorious selection process upon the arrival of new prisoners. As trains brought in countless Jews, Soviet prisoners of war, Romani, and other victims, they were immediately evaluated by doctors like Mengele. Based on this hasty and merciless examination, only those deemed physically fit were sent to labor camps. The majority, however, were sent directly to gas chambers, facing imminent death. Mengele, unlike some of his peers, appeared to take a perverse pleasure in the selection process, even volunteering on his days off. He was alarmingly detached, seeing the prisoners not as humans but as subjects for his macabre experiments. When he first arrived at the Romani camp within Auschwitz and encountered an outbreak of noma, a severe gangrenous disease, instead of offering medical treatment, he launched a horrific study. He went as far as to kill affected children, sending their heads and organs to the SS Medical Institute in Graz for further analysis. The camp's conditions led to rampant outbreaks of diseases like typhus and scarlet fever. Mengele's response was typically chilling. In one instance, upon detecting a typhus outbreak, he sent 600 Jewish women from the affected barracks to their deaths in the gas chamber. For such extreme measures, he was awarded the War Merit Cross and eventually promoted to the senior first physician of Auschwitz-Birkenau. However, it was Mengele's experiments that earned him a particularly dark infamy. Treating Auschwitz as his personal laboratory, he pursued his interests in heredity and genetics by using the prisoners as expendable research subjects. He was especially interested in individuals with dwarfism and heterochromia iridum, two different colored eyes. In one of his most ruthless experiments, he attempted to change the eye color of those with heterochromia by injecting chemicals directly into their irises. Josef Mengele, often referred to as the Angel of Death at Auschwitz, was notorious for his heinous experiments on camp inmates. His research, driven by an obsession with genetics and the Nazi ideology of Aryan supremacy, led him to conduct experiments without concern for human life or suffering. After rigorous study on his subjects, Mengele would either order their death or personally administer lethal injections. This allowed him to examine their internal organs and preserve their skeletons for further research. Shockingly, some of his experiments involved the removal of organs without anesthesia. For instance, one man had a kidney removed and was sent back to work without any pain relief. Mengele had a particular interest in identical twins at Auschwitz, seeing them as key to his studies on heredity. During selections at the camp, he would actively seek out twins for his experiments. In the summer of 1944 alone, as 400,000 Hungarian Jews were being exterminated, Mengele is believed to have identified and examined at least 175 sets of twins. Ironically, being a twin might initially spare someone from immediate death. Those selected by Mengele were often better fed, allowed to retain their hair, and wear their own clothing. Despite this temporary reprieve, the subjects were subjected to relentless and invasive measurements. A survivor once recalled being measured alongside his twin for 2 hours. These examinations, sometimes repeated several times a week for months, aimed to discern even the minutest physical variations between identical and non-identical twins. But Mengele's research had a darker side. He would deliberately inflict pain on one twin to observe any effect on the other. He injected subjects with unknown chemicals and substances. In one horrifying instance, believing a pair of Romani twins might have tuberculosis, Mengele killed them to conduct an autopsy. He discovered he was mistaken, and the children were healthy. Witnesses recall Mengele's disturbing ability to dissociate from the atrocities he committed. Although he could display kindness, offering his subjects sweets or expressing concern for their well-being, he could coldly murder them moments later. This detachment, combined with his unyielding commitment to his research and unwavering belief in Nazi ideology, rendered him one of the most terrifying figures of the Holocaust. As the Russian front advanced into Poland in 1944, the SS began dismantling concentration camps to destroy any evidence. Auschwitz was soon to be abandoned and was later liberated by the Soviet forces. On January 27, 1945, Mengele was one of the last to leave Auschwitz. By January 17th, he was transferred to the Gross-Rosen concentration camp in Lower Silesia. Although he brought samples and notes from his research, most were left behind. Mengele's stay at Gross-Rosen was short. By mid-February, he fled, narrowly avoiding the Soviets. For the next 3 months, he moved westwards, disguising his identity. By early May, he was in Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, where he learned of Hitler's suicide and the fall of the Third Reich. After the war, the Allies planned to prosecute top government officials for war crimes, especially those who operated concentration camps. Mengele, known as the Angel of Death of Auschwitz, was among the wanted. Despite being apprehended by American forces in mid-June, his true identity went unrecognized due to the absence of the typical SS blood group tattoo. In September 1945, he was released. Adopting the name Fritz Ullmann and later Fritz Hollmann, Mengele moved continuously to evade capture. By winter 1945, he worked as a farmhand in the Alps under the alias Fritz Hollmann. The family he stayed with grew suspicious due to his strong views against the Allies. He reconnected secretly with his wife Irene during these years. Many believed Mengele was dead as there was no trace of his whereabouts. In 1949, he decided to flee Europe. Using the Rat Line, a network that helped Nazis escape post-war Europe, Mengele reached Genoa, Italy. There, with a fraudulent Red Cross passport under the name Helmut Gregor, he sailed to South America. In Argentina, a nation once accommodating to former Nazis due to political and financial reasons, individuals like Adolf Eichmann and Josef Mengele found refuge after World War II. Arriving in Buenos Aires in 1949, Mengele started anew, from working as a salesman of farming tools, reminiscent of his days in Germany, to investing in a carpentry venture with funds sent from his homeland. There's even evidence suggesting he practiced medicine without a license and possibly was involved in illegal abortions. His first marriage crumbled in this new land. By 1958, he'd married his sister-in-law, Martha Mengele, who followed him to South America. Although thought dead by many, including German authorities, he remained mostly unnoticed, even after instances that nearly exposed him. However, 1960 brought a close call. Mossad agents nabbed Eichmann, and Mengele's capture seemed imminent, yet he evaded them by being in Bolivia during the raid. Mengele would soon hop between South American countries, hiding with Nazi loyalists like Wolfram Gerhard. The 1960s saw Mengele on the run, especially when it became evident he was alive. Despite this, he briefly returned to Germany before relocating to Brazil, residing on Gerhard's farm. Assisted by friends, he assumed Gerhard's identity when the man went to Europe. Mengele's end came in 1979, succumbing to a stroke while swimming in Brazil. Aged almost 70, he outlived many of his fellow Nazis. In a bittersweet reunion, his son Rolf met him 2 years prior, describing him as an unrepentant Nazi. The world remained ignorant of Mengele's fate until 1985, when correspondents unveiled his death years before. His body was identified, exhumed, and ironically, his skeleton now aids medical education in the University of Sao Paulo. In life, Josef Mengele may have evaded justice, but his dark legacy endures as a grim reminder of the Holocaust's horrors. If you found this recounting intriguing, please like and subscribe to our channel for more captivating historical tales.